Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to be exploring this fascinating book, The Secret of Divine Civilization, written back in 1875 by Abdu'l-Bahá. Now, you may not have heard of this book before, but it lays out a plan for like a totally new world order. Think of it like a blueprint for a better future, one based on justice, equality, and unity. We're going to be unpacking the historical context, the core ideas, and most importantly, what this all might mean for us today.
Yeah, you know what's fascinating about this is how Abdu'l-Bahá was writing at a time when, well, the world was in a state of major flux. The Ottoman Empire was collapsing. The Middle East was just a cauldron of change. I mean, imagine that pressure cooker. And yet, from all that turmoil, he creates this incredibly forward-thinking work.
So 1875, a totally different world, right? What makes this book something that still resonates today?
It's all about this core concept, the oneness of humanity. Abdu'l-Bahá argues that we're all interconnected, and recognizing that interconnectedness is the foundation for a just and equitable world. It's a simple idea, but incredibly radical for its time.
Okay, oneness of humanity. It sounds idealistic, but how did that translate into practical solutions? I mean, the world was just as messy back then as it is now, right?
And that's where it gets interesting. Abdu'l-Bahá doesn't just lay out like these lofty ideals. He gives us a framework for action, a framework for building this new world order. He lays out very specific principles like justice, equality, unity, and cooperation.
Okay, those are pretty universal values.
Yeah.
What makes them unique in the context of this book?
It's the emphasis on applying them to like every facet of life. Personal, societal, global. For example, take consultation. He dedicates an entire section to this. He saw it as essential for good decision-making, ensuring that everyone has a voice and that the decisions made reflect the common good.
Hold on, consultation is a principle for civilization building. Was he talking about something like town hall meetings? Or was it something much deeper than that?
Much deeper. Imagine applying consultation to, say, a global issue like climate change. Instead of nations acting solely in their own self-interest, they would come together, they would share knowledge, they would collaborate to find solutions that benefit everyone. It's a radical departure from the way things are often done today.
That does sound radical, especially for the 1870s. I mean, the world was hardly a model of international cooperation back then. How did he see this principle playing out in such a fractured world?
Well, you see, Abdu'l-Bahá believed that this interconnectedness wasn't just some feel-good concept, but like a fundamental reality. He saw conflict and division as stemming from a lack of understanding of this essential unity. So for him, consultation wasn't just about making decisions. It was about transforming the way we relate to each other, moving from an us versus them mentality to a we mentality.
That's a huge shift. Okay, but let's say we embrace this we mentality. What does that actually look like in practice? How do we bridge that gap between the ideal and reality?
That's where the book gets really powerful. He doesn't just talk about principles, he talks about practices. He advocates for things like education, service, forgiveness, and love. Not just as abstract ideas, but as active forces for change.
So it's not just about reading this book and saying, well, that's a nice idea. It's about actually putting these principles into practice in our own lives.
Exactly. It's about taking these ideas and letting them shape our actions, shape our relationships, shape our communities, and ultimately the world that we create. It's about understanding that change doesn't happen overnight, but through consistent effort and a commitment to these values.
This is already giving me a whole new perspective. So we've talked about the context with the oneness of humanity and these really powerful principles. But how does it all come together? So for the average person listening to this?
That's the key question, isn't it? And it's something we're going to keep exploring as we go deeper. But I think a big takeaway here is that this book provides a framework for thinking about our place in the world. It encourages us to look beyond our individual interests and consider the well-being of all. It challenges us to ask, what if unity and cooperation were the foundation of our society? What would that world look like?
It's definitely making me think. So is this book some sort of philosophical treatise? Or does he get into specifics about how these principles translate into action? I mean, how do we go from oneness to actual solutions for real-world problems?
That's where it gets even more interesting. He gets very specific. In fact, let's dive into one of the key practices that he emphasizes, education.
Okay, I'm intrigued. We'll dive into that right after this.
So we were talking about education. You know, we often think of it as simply acquiring knowledge, but Abdu'l-Bahá saw it as something much deeper. He believed it was about developing the full potential of every single person.
That's interesting. So not just stuffing our brains with facts and figures, but something more holistic, What did he mean by full potential?
Well, he saw education as this process of cultivating moral and spiritual qualities, fostering critical thinking skills, and nurturing a sense of responsibility toward humanity as a whole. It's about understanding our interconnectedness and using knowledge to build a better world, not just for ourselves, but for everyone.
That's quite different from how education is often viewed today. I can see how that ties back to his emphasis on the oneness of humanity. But how did he see this kind of education playing out in practice?
He believed that a society with a truly educated populace, a populace equipped with both knowledge and strong moral character, would be capable of creating a just and equitable world. And, he didn't just talk about education in a general sense. He specifically championed the education of women, believing it to be absolutely crucial for the progress of society.
Wow, advocating for women's education back in the 1870s. That was pretty revolutionary for his time.
Absolutely. He was ahead of his time in so many ways. For example, he also emphasized the importance of eliminating prejudice and discrimination in all forms. He saw these as major roadblocks to achieving true unity and harmony in the world.
So he wasn't just some lofty idealist. He was grappling with real-world issues, the same ones that we're still struggling with today.
Exactly. And, it's remarkable how his insights still resonate today. Think about all the current conversations around social justice, equity, and inclusion. These are all themes that Abdu'l-Bahá was addressing over a century ago.
It's mind-blowing how a book written so long ago can be so relevant to our present challenges. It's like he had a glimpse into the future. Okay, well, let's go back to education for a minute. He clearly saw it as this powerful tool for social change. Did he give any specific examples of what this kind of transformative education might look like?
He emphasized the importance of teaching, not just practical skills, but also moral principles. Things like honesty, integrity, compassion, and service to others. He believed that true knowledge isn't just about facts, but about understanding our place in the world and using our abilities to contribute to the well-being of humanity.
That's a powerful vision.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, how do we bridge that gap between the ideal and the reality? I mean, our current education systems often seem so focused on standardized tests and career preparation. How do we bring this more holistic approach into our schools and communities?
That's the challenge, isn't it? And it's something that we need to be actively thinking about and working towards. But I think the secret of divine civilization provides some guidance. It encourages us to look at education, not just as a means to an end, but as a transformative process that shapes individuals and societies. It challenges us to rethink our priorities and to ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to create through education?
It's like he's inviting us to reimagine the very purpose of education, to see it as a force for positive change. But education is just one piece of the puzzle, right? What are some of the other practices that he emphasizes?
Well, he speaks extensively about service to humanity. He believed that true fulfillment comes not from self-gratification, but from using our talents and resources to serve others and contribute to the betterment of society.
So it's not just about personal success or individual happiness. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness.
Yeah.
And using our abilities to make a positive impact on the world.
Leslie, it's about shifting from a self-centered perspective to a more outward-looking one, recognizing that our well-being is intertwined with the well-being of others.
That resonates with me, but honestly, it also feels a bit daunting. I mean, with all the problems in the world, where do we even begin?
That's where Abdu'l-Bahá's emphasis on another key practice comes in: forgiveness. He saw it as essential for breaking down barriers between people and fostering understanding and reconciliation.
Forgiveness. That's a tough one, so especially when we're talking about historical injustices and deep-seated conflicts. How did he see forgiveness playing a role in building this more unified world?
He believed that holding on to anger and resentment only perpetuates cycles of conflict and division. He saw forgiveness not as condoning wrongdoing, but as a conscious choice to release the negativity that prevents us from moving forward and building a better future.
So forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past or ignoring injustice, but about choosing to let go of the bitterness that keeps us trapped in those cycles.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, even in the face of differences and disagreements. And it's about creating space for healing and reconciliation.
That's a powerful message. It seems like each of these practices, education, service, forgiveness, they all tie back to his core idea of the oneness of humanity.
You're absolutely right. They're all interconnected, like threads woven together to create this tapestry of a new world order. And there's one more thread that we need to talk about.
Love. That's a big one. can feel kind of abstract and touchy-feely.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about global issues and complex challenges, how did Abdu'l-Bahá approach this concept?
He saw love not just as a sentimental emotion, but as a powerful force for transformation. He believed that love, expressed through compassion, kindness, and understanding, has the power to break down barriers, heal wounds, and inspire positive action.
That's a beautiful vision. But I'm curious to know more about how he saw love manifesting in practical ways. What did he say about how we can cultivate and express love in our daily lives?
That's something that we'll explore further as we delve deeper into the secret of divine civilization. But the key takeaway here is that, for Abdu'l-Bahá, love wasn't just an abstract ideal. It was the driving force behind all of his teachings and the foundation for building a just and unified world.
This conversation is already shifting my perspective. It's making me think about how these principles, education, service, forgiveness, love, could be applied to the challenges that we face today.
And that's the beauty of exploring these timeless ideas. They offer us guidance, they offer us inspiration, and they offer us a framework for creating a more just and equitable world. But we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover in the secret of divine civilization.
This is turning into quite the intellectual adventure. And speaking of adventures, we have one more leg of this journey to complete. We'll be right back after a moment. To wrap up our deep dive into the secret of divine civilization. All right, we're back and ready for this final part of our deep dive into the secret of divine civilization. We've covered a lot. The historical context, those powerful principles, oneness, consultation, education, service, forgiveness, even love. It's been a lot to take in. But I feel we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, there's always more to uncover, especially with a book as rich and insightful as this one. We've talked about these principles, but I think what's really important is understanding how they all work together to create a path towards a better future.
That makes sense. It's like we've been given all these different pieces, and now we need to figure out how they fit together to create that bigger picture. So how do we actually apply all of this to our lives? I mean, it's easy to talk about these lofty ideals, but how do we translate them into action?
Well, Abdu'l-Bahá doesn't just leave us hanging with a bunch of abstract concepts. He gives us practical guidance. He emphasizes that true spirituality isn't just about personal enlightenment. It's about taking action, working for the betterment of society as a whole. It's about recognizing that our well-being is interconnected with the well-being of others.
So it's not just about reading this book and feeling all inspired. It's about putting these principles into practice in the real world, in our communities, in our relationships, even in the way we approach global issues. But that can feel kind of overwhelming. Right? Where do we even begin?
It's true. The world is full of complex challenges, and it can feel like our individual actions are just a drop in the ocean. But remember what we talked about earlier, the oneness of humanity. Our actions, no matter how small they may seem, are all interconnected. And when we start living by these principles, even in small ways, we contribute to this ripple effect. That can lead to real change.
So it's not about waiting for some grand solution or a perfect moment. It's about starting where we are with what we have and taking those small steps towards building a better world. But with so many problems in the world, it's hard to know where to focus our energy. Did Abdu'l-Bahá offer any guidance on that?
He did. He believed that each of us has unique talents and abilities that we can use to contribute to the well-being of humanity. He encourages us to find what we're passionate about, what we're good at, and to use those gifts in service to others. It could be anything from volunteering in our local community to working on a global issue that we care deeply about.
That's empowering. It takes the pressure off of feeling like we have to solve every problem in the world. It's about finding our own unique way to contribute, using our own strengths and passions. But even with that focus, it's easy to feel discouraged when we see so much conflict and division in the world. Did Abdu'l-Bahá acknowledge those challenges?
Absolutely. He lived in a time of great upheaval and witnessed firsthand the devastating consequences of prejudice, greed, and violence. But he never lost hope. He believed that humanity has the potential to transcend these limitations and create a world where peace, justice, and unity prevail.
Where did that unwavering optimism come from? It's easy to feel cynical when we look at the state of the world today.
His optimism stemmed from his deep faith in the power of love. He believed that love, expressed through compassion, kindness, and understanding, has the power to transform individuals and ultimately society as a whole.
We talked about love earlier, but it's hard to grasp how something so seemingly intangible can be a driving force for social change. How did he see love manifesting in practical ways?
He saw love as the foundation. For all the other principles we've discussed, he believed that when we act with love, we naturally strive for justice, we seek unity, we embrace consultation, we educate our hearts as well as our minds, we serve others willingly, and we offer forgiveness freely.
So love isn't just a feeling, it's a way of being in the world, a lens through which we approach everything we do. But how do we cultivate that kind of love, especially in a world that often feels so divided and hostile?
He believed that love is nurtured through conscious effort. It's about choosing to see the good in others, even when it's difficult. It's about practicing kindness and compassion, even towards those who may seem different from us. It's about extending forgiveness, even when we've been hurt. And it's about dedicating ourselves to service, putting the needs of others before our own.
It sounds like a lifelong practice, a continuous process of refining our thoughts, words, and actions. But even if we manage to cultivate that kind of love within ourselves, how can we spread it to others? How can we make it contagious?
He believed the most powerful way to spread love is through example. When we live by these principles, when we embody love in our interactions with others, we inspire those around us to do the same. It's like a ripple effect, spreading outwards from our individual actions to touch the lives of others.
This deep dive has been such a thought-provoking journey. It's challenged my assumptions, expanded my understanding of what's possible, and given me a renewed sense of hope for the future.
And that's the beauty of exploring these timeless ideas. They offer guidance, inspiration, and a framework for creating a more just and equitable world. But the conversation doesn't end here. The real work begins when we take these insights and apply them to our own lives.
So what's the final takeaway? What do we do with all this newfound knowledge and inspiration?
Well, I'd encourage you to reflect on what resonated most with you during this deep dive. What principles or practices spoke to your heart? And how can you begin to incorporate those into your daily life, even in small ways?
I love that. It's not about memorizing the book or becoming an expert on Abdu'l-Bahá's teachings. It's about taking what we've learned and using it to create positive change in our own unique way.
Exactly. It's about letting these ideas take root in our hearts and minds, and then allowing them to blossom into actions that contribute to a more just, equitable, and harmonious world.
This has been an incredible journey. Thank you for guiding us through The Secret of Divine Civilization. It's a book that I'll definitely be revisiting and reflecting on.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, the journey doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to build that better world we all dream of.
Beautifully said. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring these ideas. Until next time, keep diving deep.